Um, Hi, everyone, and welcome to this 13th episode of the Future of Urban AI webinar series. I'm Hubert Beroche, I'm the founder of Urban AI, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you today. So just a few words, just before starting this new episode about the methodology behind the project. Well, if you already attended the previous sessions, you might already be aware of the Future of Urban AI series and the methodology behind it. But basically, we draw inspiration from the Future of Urban Tech Horizon Scan that has been realized by Anthony Townsend, who is also like co-hosting this series and his team at Cornell Tech. And basically, if you go on the Future of Urban Tech website, you can see this interactive graph that proposes several possible urban futures, signals on urban technologies. And so what we did last year is that we focused on the AI part of this graph, trying to understand what are the big trends around urban artificial intelligence. And this is how we had our first season last year, for which we interviewed 10 fascinating speakers to explore 10 different urban AI futures. And actually following this first season, we published a report called The Future of Urban AI, where we synthesized the main insights of this first season. And 1 year later, following the great success of this first season, we decided to keep exploring this amazing graph with Anthony Townsend and his team. And so that's why we are now exploring 8 more urban AI futures with 8 new and fascinating speakers. So we already discussed the use of generative AI in urban planning, the use of machine learning in predictive maintenance, and software-defined sensing last week with Charlie Catlett. And this week, for the 13th episode, we have the great pleasure of welcoming Naysan Saran, who is CEO at Can Forecast, who is also actually a member at Urban AI, one of the very first member of Urban AI. So always a pleasure to have you, Naysan. And yeah, just like the final map that can here is just the final map to show you where we are right now. As usual, we will first have 20 minutes of presentation from Naysan, and then a 20-minute Q&A session. You might know that for this Q&A session, if you want to directly open your micro, open your camera, and ask your question to Naysan, you can do it. And if you are shy, you can also use the chat, and I will ask your question. Naysan, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Hubert. Thanks, Anthony. So, hi everyone. My name is Naysan, co-founder and CEO of Can Forecast. Really looking forward to this session with you, and hopefully we can make it an interactive conversation. Really looking forward to knowing more about your inputs, your points of view. So we can build this together, basically. I do have a small presentation prepared just for this occasion. Can you let me know if you can see my screen? Perfect. So the goal today is to discuss about anticipatory government as part of the future of urban AI. And specifically, it's going to be about some of the use cases of municipalities across Canada that we've been working with for this anticipatory government perspective. So just a little bit of the outline of the presentation, a bit of context, what's anticipatory government specifically for infrastructure, who we are at Can Forecast, use cases with some of the cities we've been working with, the challenges and maybe the next steps, and then hopefully we can have a nice conversation around these or outside these as well if you're interested in some other topics. So in terms of the context, the focus that I was hoping to bring due to our expertise was urban infrastructure. Why urban infrastructure? Because infrastructure is really the foundation of our daily lives, and usually you know that your infrastructure works when you completely forget it exists. So you never want to think about the fact that water cannot be there. You don't want to think about the fact that electricity cannot be there. You don't want to think about the fact that, when you need to go from point A to point B, a road might have an issue. So we just want our infrastructure to be so good that we completely forget about it. Kind of like, in a human body, you don't want to think about your circulatory system because the moment you think about it, it means you have a problem. And this is becoming increasingly important because, according to the United Nations, 2 out of 3 humans are projected to live in urban areas by 2050. So that's coming up pretty fast. Most of the human population will be around urban centers. And so urban infrastructure, urban AI is going to be increasingly important. Zooming in our area of deployments, so North America mainly, actually, it's not going so well for us in North America in terms of urban infrastructure. America's infrastructure scores a C minus across water, wastewater, roads. And Canada's infrastructure deficit is estimated at $122 billion. That's just current infrastructure, not even taking into account what has to be built in the next few years. Why is this the case? It's called the paradox of developed countries. Most of this infrastructure for developed nations, including North America countries, they have been built very early in the century. So in the 30s, and well, actually not in the 30s because of the depression, something we can talk about, but mostly in the 1940s and 1950s and 1960s with the boom after the Second World War. You had all this infrastructure that was built. And the issue is that because it was working so well in the 70s and in the 80s, it wasn't something that, from the politics point of view, it was interesting to invest in because our taxes, we want to go towards things that we see right now as an issue, not necessarily things that we see 20 years from now as an issue. So it was neglected infrastructure. We started accumulating this deficit ever since the 1970s. And now these pipes are breaking. We have problems with our roads. So it's really the situation. I don't want to compare it to climate change, but usually when things are going well and you have, 20 years, 30 years before you can start having problems, we forget about the things that we own, and then we have to uh, work with the deficit. So that's the situation we're in. And what this really means is that we have more and more water main breaks in North America. We have more and more sewer overflows. So the sewer overflow situation is actually something that is related to climate change because most sewer networks were built again in the 60s and the 70s. And these sewer networks at that time, they were designed for a specific, it's called design storm. So you want your sewer network to work for a 1 in 100 year storm event, for instance. You want your sewer network to work for a 1 in 25 year storm event. So you know that if you have an extreme storm, the sewer might overflow, but you're also fine because that extreme storm might happen once every 25 years. So it's not so bad. But the issue of climate change is that these storms that used to happen once every 25 years, they're actually now happening a lot more frequently. So if your extreme event for which your sewer network was calibrated was once every 25 years, but now you're seeing more and more of these storms every 5 years, you can have a lot more of these sewer overflows. And this is what we've been experiencing in North America, specifically in the eastern part. Again, road collapse. So this is all across North America that's happening more and more. We have this infrastructure, we have a deficit. What are we going to do for municipalities to actually use their available limited budget to efficiently address these issues? So about Count Forecast, who we are. So we do innovation in the water and wastewater sector. We've actually been with more than, so I have to update this. Now we're proud to be with more than 35 municipalities actually across North America and France. We have co-developed all of our solutions with public governments. So municipalities, governmental departments, both provincial and federal level. And a lot of what we have has been because some of these communities told us, okay, you have X that you have developed, but we also need to address this other issue. Is there something we can do about it? And usually when we do that, we actually do publish with our clients. So if I know that there is a strong community of researchers around urban AI, so if you're actually interested in some of our publications, we actually have published a paper on machine learning techniques to optimize infrastructure investment for the water distribution network with one of our very good clients in Ontario, and another one with Halifax Water on how to predict pipe bursts if you have flow meters installed in your water network. So if you're interested, send me a message, LinkedIn. I'm happy to share these papers with you. We also have case studies selected by Solar Impulse Foundation and the OECD. So what we're trying to do is really showcasing examples of these municipalities working to bring innovation forward for the whole community. So again, if you're interested, we're happy to share. And then moving to the fun part. So use cases of urban AI. First case is predicting leaks in the water network with the municipality of Halifax. So Halifax is a pretty one of the largest municipalities in Eastern Canada. So it's in Nova Scotia. You can see it in here. And I always like, at least to show a little bit of what it is that the city looks like from a living there perspective. I've never been there myself, but apparently it's a very, very nice place. A huge economy there goes to Halifax, lots of ports. And so on their end, they are actually very, very forward thinking. Halifax Water actually is an organization mandated by the city of Halifax to take care of the water infrastructure, and they're very efficient at what they do. They wanted to know if we could find a methodology to actually identify leaks in two of their pressure zones. So these are technically, you call these district metered areas. So these are areas where you actually have some valves to make sure that the pressure is in control. So the water pressure that you get through your tap. And these locations that you see here are flow meters in and out of the area. So you know how much water is coming in, how much water is coming out at any given time of the day. And the goal was to try to use that information to pinpoint if we could detect leaks, hours when they start creating themselves. So again, the paper is online, but I'm happy to share it with you if you're interested. It's actually, I think it's open access, so you can access it if you type the name. And what we did was, so it's a part of AI, but it's really a very, very statistical time series forecasting methodology. It's called Bayesian dynamic linear models. The way that it works, you can see it as a time series forecasting. And what we do is that we take, so what you see here, the dots are actually the flow in a particular district metered area, which is an area like this. And the dots are the flow. And I don't know if you can see the red. The red is actually a model that was calibrated to historical data of the flow within this district metered area. So within this area that they're interested in finding breaks. And so the idea is you're going to calibrate a model to forecast flow, but your goal is not to forecast the flow. Your goal is to detect whenever what you see is far enough from your forecast that something might be wrong. So if your model is well calibrated and it forecasts that your flow at 10 a.m. should be, let's say, 500 cubic meters per hour, and you're starting to see that it's different, but is it different in a statistically significant perspective or not? And I don't want to go too much into the details, but basically the way it works is that there is something called the Bayes factor that if it goes below or above a certain threshold, it means that statistically something has been going off. And that particular occasion that you see here, the Bayes factor falling below the threshold, raising an alarm, there was actually a break at that point. So this is a little bit how you can use modeling, not to model the future, but actually to identify anomalies within a time series forecasting system. So this is the first case to predict leaks, because once you have something like that, then you can set an alarm to the drinking water operations. Something might be wrong with your DMA. Can you look into it? The second case is more in terms of asset management. So not really in terms of operations, but more in terms of likelihood of failure times consequence of failure. And this is something that a lot of our communities are really interested um, as part of our offering, and you will see why, I hope. So it's a 360-degree consequence of failure assessment. Sudbury is mining, mostly a mining municipality in northern Canada. And you can see here, Toronto is here, Detroit is to the west. So this is just to show you a little bit of where it is. This is their nickel. So my understanding is that there was someone in Sudbury who really wanted to have a huge version of a Canadian nickel, and they fought their whole life and they got it to happen. So there's a whole Wikipedia page on this if you're interested. It's pretty interesting. It's really a place for mining, industrial, and the people who live there, they really like enjoying the lakes. I think there are more than 300 lakes in that region. So it really is Canada as you can imagine it in terms of lakes and nature. So that's a little bit of the life there. This case study was published by the OECD Observatory for Public Sector Innovation. So again, it's public. If you're interested, I can send it to you, but you can also type it and find it online. So what we did was they were actually very interested in, okay, we want to know the likelihood of failure of a particular water main within the network, but they also want to know the whole risk, because risk is not necessarily the likelihood of failure of a pipe. Risk is also the consequence or the cost of failure. So you want to know, okay, how likely is it that I'm going to have a problem on this water main or in this road? But you also really want to know what are the consequences, because let's say you have an infrastructure asset that is very likely to fail in the next 10 years, but also it's in a place where it's not really necessary, there is redundancy. Maybe it's not that important actually. But if you have an asset that is of high likelihood of failure, and if it fails, you're going to have a lot of problems in your city, then this becomes a high risk asset. Because then, if this failure actually does happen in the next 5 years, you're going to be in trouble. So, this is what they wanted to quantify. So what consequences if this water pipe fails? So this is just an example of the types of KPIs that we measured and included in this risk. So we have cost of repair, which is how much is it going to cost to just fix the pipe? Not necessarily replace it or anything, just fix it, and it's probably going to break in another 3 years or so, but we're good to go for the next 3 years. So we provide estimated cost of repair. This is all actually the three costs that you see here. So estimated cost for repair, estimated cost for replacement. So replacement is, let's say I'm tired of repairing this pipe. I just want to put a brand new pipe on the ground, and hopefully it's going to last me another 20 years before I find a first break. This is the dollars per meter, usually how they calculate that in the cities. And the rehabilitation is another option that they have. So it's different from repair and replacement in the sense that rehabilitation is actually something that you're going to do, a structural repair that is going to extend the useful life a lot more than a simple repair. So these are the different costs. And this, the way we do is that we have worked with municipalities across our collaborative group, and we have aggregated their costs. So every time that a particular client of ours sends in a team to do repair and they take note of how much it costs them, they can share that information with us. And we have these aggregated models. So basically, uh, even if a city never has accumulated that information, we can actually use our pre-trained AI model to give them an idea of how much it's going to be for their particular province, at least. And then we also have cost of lost water, because that's really something that people forget. If you have a water main, it's going to actually leak some very valuable water into the ground. Another factor that we add is property damage linked to flooding. So this, the way we do is that we connect with Google Maps, and what it does, it's going to find places of interest. So it could be anything. It could be a coffee shop, it could be a hospital. It could really go from very important like hospital to not as critical, like let's say a garage or something. And what we do is that within this area, we see how many places of interest are there. See here, it's 0 because all of these points are Google places, and this area, this circle, has none of them inside. So it's very likely that even if this breaks, in terms of flooding, at least, none of these will, no area of critical area will be affected. Then we have population per kilometer squared, traffic disruption. So again, mapping with Google Traffic API. Public image is another thing that we added. At first, when we told municipalities we were going to add public image as a consequence, they started smiling, and it's a little bit uncomfortable when you get. But now they actually really like this feature because, so let's say even as a citizen, if the city you get home and you see that, okay, your road is blocked because the city has to do some work on your road because of water main and sewer or the road itself. It's fine if it's never been done before, but if you see that they're blocking your roads, but 3 months ago again they were blocking your road for another reason, and last year they also were blocking your road for another reason, then these frustration can accumulate, and this is where people go to, they start complaining, the news gets involved, and it becomes a whole thing. So actually what we do is that we ask the municipality to give us the history of the work they've been doing on all of these streets. Could be water, could be wastewater, could be resurfacing, could be anything. And so we calculate, okay, how much work has been done in this area, in this neighborhood in the past 3 years. And the more work has been done, the less you want another work to be done in the short term. So this is a little bit of the consequence of failure. Um, just maybe before wrapping it up, I was hoping to discuss some of the challenges, because we always talk about, how urban AI is a great thing to implement and how the cities have been successful. And well, as you all know, no success happens without challenges. And there are quite a few that we have experienced in the past few years. So first of it is change management. Change management has been complicated to implement, and it's an ongoing process. And I honestly don't know if it's ever going to be terminated. So the reason why we have, at least in our experience, had a lot of resistance to change, it's not necessarily because people do not want to adopt new technologies. That, I think, was an issue maybe 10, 15 years ago. But now you have, more young people into cities working. They are used to, Snapchat, Instagram. They do all of the tech outside work, and they actually are keen to having that tech inside work as well. So more and more, it's not really a resistance to technology. It's just that municipalities in North America, at least, the majority of them are understaffed. So we don't have a lot of people who are interested in doing a career in municipalities necessarily, in water and wastewater and roads. And so they have a lot of work. Everyone who's there, from our experience, have had a lot of work to deal with. And so they're too busy with emergencies to plan for innovation. So for instance, one of our very good manager clients, she told me that people, they don't even have 10 minutes to learn something that's going to be useful to them, to save them 10 hours, because there's so much to get done. So it's really trying to squeeze in your project in the middle of so many emergencies that they have, that has been difficult for us. Second is silos, of course. Again, this is something that maybe I was hoping to, discuss, have your opinion. At first, when we started, we thought that, okay, these silos, resistance to change, why are people not sharing their data sets? But then we started realizing that, oops, sorry, this is from work. Yeah, we started realizing that actually a lot, well, I mean, at least some of the times it was valid why people were protective of their data sets. Because, for instance, if you take a drinking water network and you look at the location and specification of water reservoirs, is that necessarily information that you can share online, knowing that, there is a lot of cybersecurity threats, there are other types of threats to municipalities. So sometimes the reason they don't want to put their data completely open is actually valid, even though we wish they would. So sometimes, for valid reasons, department can be protective of the data sets. Sometimes within organizations or within cities, what we have realized is that there is not necessarily a very clear governance who owns the data. So the people who actually physically own the data, they don't want other people meddling with, adding features, editing, deleting, when they feel like they have a good grasp of that data set. So that's within the same organization. One thing we realize is that it's not only silos within the organization, but also between levels of government. So this silo thing is really complex to navigate. Actually, I have a good example on this one. So we started the project um, with a federal um, government entity last year. And for this project, we needed information from the cities where that federal entity had some locations of interest. And so we thought it's going to be easy, we just write to the city, we say we need the data for the federal level, and it's just going to share the data, no problem. So it turned out to be a lot more complicated than we thought, because at the municipal level, the employees are very busy again. And so they don't want to take any risks. So they sent a request to legal. The legal department don't want to take any risk either, because their job is to protect the city. They don't necessarily know how it's going to be used at the federal level, who's going to be used, with whom it's going to be shared with. So, a long story short, this thing, instead of this being so easy as we thought, to just share the data from municipal to federal, it took months and months of work and negotiation and trying to understand the data sharing agreements. And so every time you plan a project, one thing we've learned, you really have to plan a lot of time, because the things that you think are easy are not necessarily easy. And then data collection, finally, preparation, quality control. So really 80% of the work in data science, unfortunately, is data collection, preparation, and quality control. Really, um, to be honest, I believe sincerely, with all of our experience, the data science is actually the easy part. So when we actually had a few years ago, we had the habit of asking municipalities, well, send us whatever you have, and then we're going to extract the information. And we started receiving not only Excel and GIS data files, but we started receiving, actual footage, video footage, MP4 footage. We started receiving scans of, things that's it's extremely difficult to numerize. We started receiving some file formats, proprietary file formats. We had no idea how to work with the file formats. So and all of this data is scattered in so many directions, and so this really actually doing the collection, putting it into a structural way, doing the QA/QC, this easily takes 80% of the work, because once the data is properly structured, actually the models are pretty good right now to do some good work. So this is actually the core of the work in our experience, and thankfully some startups are actually turning this into an opportunity. So last week, actually, I had the opportunity to discuss with the folks from a startup called Waterly. Waterly is actually one of the fastest growing water data startups in North America right now. And so what they do is that they will give water wastewater operators tablets, and these tablets are going to replace the pen and paper documents that they used to fill. And wherever an operator has something to do, instead of using pen and paper and just putting it into a drawer, they're going to import that information into a tablet. So they are actually structuring all of that input data in a way that is going to be a lot easier for companies like ours to leverage that for data science, hopefully in the future. And yeah, so in terms of the next steps, I just wanted to leave you with that. There are many, many opportunities for innovators in terms of aging infrastructure, integrated water, wastewater roads, facilities, bridges, asset management. The workforce actually in municipalities is aging. So a huge issue is, how are we going to preserve the knowledge? How are we going to make sure that the new people are trained fast enough? How are we going to automate some of the work? Because we don't have enough workforce, everybody has too much to do. Change management and data governance standards. So yeah, that's all I had. Hope you it was helpful and a bit interesting, and looking forward to hearing your questions.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much, Naysan, for this very interesting presentation, for making us travel a bit in the different Canadian cities with which you partner. It's definitely fascinating, as actually Anthony highlighted in the chat, to see all the organizational resistance behind technological innovation, and that it's not just about deploying technology like you would deploy software or hardware, but it's something that is much more complex, holistic. So maybe we might have actually questions on this topic. So again, if you have any questions you want to ask, feel free to open your micro and directly ask Naysan. I actually have one question, Naysan, which is related to last week session, during which like Charlie Tatlet presented like basically kind of ubiquitous computing and sensing, the fact that we have more and more sensors to collect data. But in your solution, it looks like you're not using any sensor. So why are you not using sensor? What is motivating this decision? Is it like in terms of cost efficiency or ecological footprint, or?
Great question. So actually, you're right. We can work with municipalities that don't have sensors. Right now, we do use sensors for, let's say, pressure, rain gauges, flow. So it really depends on the type of data. The reason why sometimes we will not use sensors is because for smaller communities, they don't even have sometimes the process in place to put these sensors. So, you know, um, large cities, let's say New York or Montreal or Toronto, they have so much budget, and they usually will have a program with sensors. So they will put sensors on a lot of things, and they're even trying to get to the digital twin eventually, where their whole networks are represented in 3D in a numerical format. But there, sometimes the smaller communities, they're still in the pen and papers part. They don't necessarily even have like a GIS representation of their network. So they're just in terms of numerical maturity levels. The sensor is maybe a 7, and they're at a 3, trying to get to a 4. So when this is the case, we still develop models that we can use whatever it is they have and move them to a 4. And hopefully in 2 to 3 years, we can get to a 7 with the sensors.
Okay, so it's also a way of making your solution more inclusive, actually, like taking into consideration different level of maturity from different municipalities with their own resources.
Exactly.
We have a question from Luis about the use case too. He's basically saying in the chat, you are trying to evaluate consequence of failure in a pipe network. In a network, there are a lot of segments. Then the outcome is a ranking of consequences of the whole sections.
Let me see. In the network, there are lots of segments. Oh, so are you asking for if we do like a holistic overview of the consequence, or we just stay at the segment level? Is that your question, Luis?
I think he's asking for the holistic.
Yeah, if you want, I can speak right now very quickly because I am with my son. Now it's you analyze one segment, but in a network of pipe, there is a lot of segments. Then you analyze each segment, you analyze the consequences of each segment, and then you get a ranking of the consequences of each segment, and you evaluate what are the worst segments, etc. Because when you explain that, you said, okay, you focus in only one segment. Then I realized that you have to analyze the whole network. It's for that. It's to understand the use case number 2. Thank you.
Yes, Luis, you're absolutely right. This is a great point. Let me share my screen again. So you're absolutely right. It's something that has to be done for all of the segments. So can you see the screen again? In here, so basically this is this particular segment that you see here. But the water network is composed, of course, as you know, of a lot of segments. And what we do, actually, you can see all of the different segments are color-coded. So these colors represent from blue to low consequence to high consequence, a ranking, exactly as you said, of the consequences of failure. And what we do once of course it's done automatically, but once we have the consequences for all of the pipes within the network, then yes, it's relatively straightforward to rank them from lowest to highest. And when you take that with the likelihood of failure, you have your risk ranking across the whole network from lowest to highest. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
I had another question, if I may speak directly. So thanks, Naysan, for the presentation. I had a question on how you and your team were approaching the municipalities, sorry, and if you were trying to approach them with a one-size-fits-all model, trying to make the industry converge as soon as possible so that it's easier to scale, maybe, or do you think that each municipality has such a specific water system that in order to develop a bit this system, and your solution, you need to really like tailor your solution each municipality by municipality, in your case?
Yeah, I see your question. This is a question we've been asking ourselves so much. So at first we wanted to do one size fits all because when you're a startup, the credo for startups is create a SaaS model, software as a service, and you know, everyone is gonna just log into, upload their data. It's gonna be wholly automated. So we started with this, and we realized we were not gonna succeed at all. Like zero chance for us to succeed in municipalities if we were trying to do this, just because, as you said, each municipality is a bit different. Even the more advanced that have, you know, very accurate GIS description of their water wastewater network, well, because they're advanced, they also have, as Hubert mentioned, they have so many sensors, and they didn't install these sensors, so you're not going to use them. So they want you to use these extra sensors that they have, so you do an even better job. And the other ones on the other end of the spectrum, the other communities who still don't have a GIS, well, you have to work with their PDFs. And sometimes these PDFs, you know, there are some PDFs that you can just run through a system and it's going to geolocate it for you. There are some PDFs that you really have to squint your eyes like this. This is the reality, right? And so, and if we're going to accompany all of them towards this direction, we realize that we can't really be at a startup scale level that, okay, we really don't care if your data set isn't as high quality, come back in 3 years. Well, how are you going to create a movement if you just, one, leave people behind, and two, even from an economic perspective, these are all potential very good clients that we would have neglected. Whereas if, you know, we work with them from the data analysis perspective, then they know us, they trust us, and when they get to maturity levels, they still work with us. So even from a financial point of view, it makes sense for us to work with them from the get-go. So it's a little bit of both, actually, of the systems that you said. We take a good amount of time to work with them on cleaning up their data. We charge, of course, but once it's done, then we try to automate.
Okay. Okay, interesting. So you're actually building the industry with them, with the municipalities. And jumping on what you said, you think that like they all have the same problem, so the problem is really well identified, and they use, the technology is different, the process is different, so you need to work around that, or they all have also like different problems, and so you're trying to find different solutions at the end?
Yeah, again, your questions are so to the point. So again, something we've been asking ourselves for so long. At first, we thought that it would be one problem fits all, and then we realized, so people, we started doing IntelliPipes for a drinking water network, and then another municipality told us that, but hey, we do wastewater. And then now we actually have 4 clients. We're launching a project to include roads as well, because a lot of cities, you know, if they're going to do something on their water pipe, the water pipe is under the road. So they have to break down the road regardless if they're going to do something important on their water mains. So they actually need to coordinate, because you don't want to break down the road today for the water main, and then 6 months later for the wastewater, and then 3 months after that for the road itself. So they said, okay, let's do a corridor based. So we're going to take 200 meters of water, wastewater, and road, and we're going to coordinate like that. So we're building this with them actually in the next 6 months. But every time, almost every 6 months, there is a municipality that's going to tell us, hey, but you know, we also need this. You can't just do this and it's standalone. So the question is, how do we keep innovating with our clients, but also not spreading ourselves too thin? Because if we say yes every time there is a new idea, actually we end up in a difficult position where we're always developing new stuff, we're not selling enough, we're not scaling enough. So it's a fine line, it's a balance between both.
Okay, yeah, some stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Maybe 2 last questions actually. Shmuel is asking how anticipatory government can support reduction poverty and social inequality in urban area. And like you answered actually a bit to also Anthony's question, but yes, basically, what is your business model, even if you shared some already shared some clue.
So this is a good question. Reduction of and it's not entirely my area of expertise, so it's probable that you're not going to be entirely satisfied, Shmuel, with what I have to say. Maybe we can discuss. But in terms of inequality reduction, the fact that so one of our good clients, in parallel to what we've been doing with the water mains, they actually have an AI-based lead detection program. So I don't know if you're aware of this situation. So lead services, you have your water mains that bring water from the city water network to your home, and to your neighborhood, and then to get to your home you have the city pipe, and then you have a service, so it's just a connector for your home to have city water. And that connector back in the days 100 years ago or so was in lead, usually. Now lead is actually linked to some very bad health issues on people who actually drink this water from lead services. And this in the US has been strongly related to racial inequality and just social inequality in general, because the areas, the neighborhoods, the city neighborhoods where you still have lead are usually areas where you still have communities that are underserved historically. So one way that anticipatory government can actually help reducing social inequalities is by helping identify. So they're using AI and machine learning to find these areas where they have lead in their services, and identify that, okay, there is probably lead here, we should replace it, because this is information that they don't necessarily even have in their records. So this is one. On our end, on the social environmental consequences, we try to add. So, for instance, the municipality, besides the Google Places, they will usually send us their own critical people. So their own critical customers can include elderly homes, homes with dialysis machines, places that if the water was lost, it would be critical to that person because that person belongs to a more sensitive group of people, if you will. So we include that. That being said, there is so much to be done in terms of reducing poverty that there is room. There is room. If you want to innovate, there is room. We're just tackling maybe 1%, even less of the challenge.
And at the end, it's also like the parameters you take into consideration in your final solution. So it's also maybe a social decision, political decision, not only a technical one.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, the technical starting to realize, I don't know if it's the same feeling across the board here, but it always seems to that the technical part is the easiest actually. Then you're really dealing with people and groups of people, and that's where it becomes complicated to innovate.
Well, I think Naysan Saran can say this because they are very good at can podcast, but technical part is not always the easiest. Thanks a lot, Naysan, for your presentation. It was really fascinating. Thanks for taking the time to answer all the questions. Thanks to all of you for your active participation. We will meet again next week with Anthony Tenson this time, and David Schumann from Technion University to talk about the future of real estate and reimagining and how we can use AI to reimagine office. Have a great week and see you next week.
See you, everyone. Bye-bye.